Riots last night at the University of California at Berkeley. You watched them break out live on this show last evening. The man who made that campus tremble joins us tonight in the studio for his first interview following the outbreak of violence. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Few people are hated more by the left than Milo Yiannopoulos, the gay Jewish immigrant who's become the face of the red-pilled right. Evidence of that was on full display last night at Berkeley, where Milo was scheduled to speak, but was evacuated shortly before the speech for his own safety. Watch what happened. America last night. Breitbart editor Milo Yiannopoulos joins us for his first interview since we spoke with him by phone last night. Milo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So here's the reason I want to talk to you. It's not to endorse your views, many of which I agree with, some of which I don't. But the point is, you tried to express your views and were prevented by a violent mob. So if you were an anarchist or a Scientologist or a flat earth activist, it wouldn't matter. You were not allowed to exercise your First Amendment rights, and that's shocking. Give us first a quick recap of what happened last night to you.
Well, I think I agree with you in the first place. I mean, I'm not any of the things that these posters characterize me as in an effort to legitimize the violence. But even if I were, I don't think it would matter for the reasons you say. So I went in to do my talk. We go in a couple of hours before to set up our tech and for me to, put on a costume or something. I had a wonderful outfit plan, which is the main reason I'm upset about yesterday. I was going to go as a native. I was going to talk about cultural appropriation in full Native American headdress. I had a full custom headdress with my name embroidered on it. I'm so mad that I didn't get to wear that. Anyway, we went in for like an hour or two beforehand. We were planning it, and suddenly there were these explosions outside. There were firecrackers and rocks being hurled at the building. The police were having things hurled at them, and I was evacuated up to the 5th floor, like by the fire escape. It was all very exciting. And then suddenly, I was being taken out of the building. I was informed that I was being evacuated because there were hundreds of protesters outside, blowing things up, hurling things at the police. The police didn't seem to me to be doing very much aside from hiding inside the building. The ground floor had been stormed, so we had to rush down to the parking lot, find one car, and that exit was blocked, so we ran to another car, and we finally got in one, and I was, bundled in, put in a bulletproof vest, and whisked away. And that is the price you pay for being a libertarian or a conservative on American college campuses. So
what's so striking is I have no doubt the average police officer does not sympathize with a mob like that. I just have no doubt about it. But the truth is they did not come to your defense in a meaningful way. The video proves it. You're affirming it now. Why?
Well, we don't know for absolutely sure, but one thing I can tell you is that the mayor of Berkeley, who was sort of gleefully egging this stuff on yesterday, who today had to apologize for the usual leftist name-calling of me today.
What did he say about you?
Oh, the usual slurs, this white supremacist speaker. I mean, please, anyone who's spent 5 seconds in my company or 2 seconds in my bedroom knows I'm not a white supremacist. But, this usual slurs that they wheel out in a sort of effort to legitimize violence against you. They want to call you the worst possible name. It's like, the punch a Nazi thing, right? Well, I could imagine a reasonable person being taken some way along the argument of, like, it's okay to punch Nazis. But the problem is that the left calls everyone Nazis. So basically, they can punch anybody. Wait a second.
Isn't it Nazis who do the punching? Isn't that what separates Nazis from the rest of us? They don't tolerate dissent, but civilized people do?
You would think so. I mean, when my book was announced, of course, there were people saying they were going to burn it while calling me the fascist. I mean, this is the sort of irony the progressive left in America doesn't seem to appreciate. But the real problem is this name-calling because, as grateful as I am to be on the show, and I like the attention, the real people that I want to hear from are, the guys who run CNN, who are legitimizing ordinary conservatives being called white supremacists, anti-Semites, racist, sexist, when they're not. There's an inevitable, obvious consequence to this.
I obviously have an interest in this because I don't anymore work at that network, so I don't even want to affirm what you just said, but I have to because it's true. Now, here is a tweet that they sent out, and I'm quoting. This is from a CNN Twitter feed. Extremist Milo Yiannopoulos, whose Berkeley event sparked protests, takes on the college establishment and rallies white supremacists. That's from the CNN Twitter feed. I mean, is any of that true?
No, I mean, it beggars belief. I mean, it just beggars belief.
But the subtext is you deserve it.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And these people must be held to account. You know, the media has created this environment in which it's okay to say almost anything about somebody who is, you know, right of Jane Fonda. You know, if you have slightly conservative or even libertarian points of view, especially if you are persuasive and charismatic and funny and effective, like we both are, you will get called the most appalling things. And it's a way of legitimizing, in some cases, as happened last night, violent responses.
But what I find so striking about this is that it should not be a left-right debate, because all Americans, as their birthright, have the right enshrined in the Bill of Rights to say what they think is true, period. And yet, I checked extensively, and so did our staff today, to find liberals defending you. I found one with an unalloyed defense. It was Peter Beinart. Peter Beinart at The Atlantic, who is a sincere and principled liberal, defended you.
Yeah.
The rest did not, and some, in fact, seem to endorse the violence against you that squelched your speech.
Well, they're in a bind, aren't they? Because if you come out against it and you condemn it, you're sort of saying there's something wrong with your own side. You're saying that something we have done has created an environment in which it's okay to physically attack the guests. I mean, you know, let's be completely clear. There's this attempt to paint what happened last night as the destruction of property and as sort of, you know, as protest. It wasn't. It was violent rioting in which people were physically assaulted, people were bleeding, people were beaten. You know, all sorts of things happened to people who just showed up, not all of whom were fans of mine, but just who wanted to come and just listen to what I had to say. You know, and those people were attacked, physically attacked, right? This is political violence in response to perfectly mainstream opinion. And what CNN and other networks like that want to do is suggest that there's something otherworldly or sinister or nefarious about me to legitimize the bad behavior on their own side.
But even if there is something otherworldly or sinister or nefarious about you, you still have a right, an absolute right, to express your political views, do you not?
Sure.
I mean, at what point
But it makes it particularly ridiculous when, you know, I don't say, as even New York Magazine admitted today, anything that is outside of the mainstream of, let's say, of any typical Trump voter. I don't have opinions that, you know, millions of Americans don't share. You know, I just happen to say them in a slightly more provocative and interesting way and on a slightly larger platform.
So just to give, I mean, I can give 1,000 examples. This is the New York Times headline over the story about what happened last night. This is today. Berkeley cancels Milo Yiannopoulos speech and Donald Trump tweets outrage. No mention of the fact that you were shut down by a mob, and this is the first line. A speech by the divisive right-wing writer Milo Yiannopoulos, University of California, Berkeley, etc.
They're trying to insinuate. I mean, Bloomberg did the same thing. They said Milo Yiannopoulos sparks riots. You know, I was like, hang on a second now. What are they trying to insinuate?
So where's this heading exactly?
Well, I feel actually more optimistic about this than probably most conservatives, because, you know, I've been on more college campuses, I think, than anybody else in America over the last 12 months as part of my tour, and I have seen a change in atmosphere. I've seen conservatives becoming more emboldened and happier. I have seen also huge numbers of alumni changing their positions on whether or not they're going to support their old schools. I mean, Missouri, when they kind of pandered to race baiters, they discovered they lost, you know, $30, $40 million in alumni donations, and enrollment went down so much they had to close 2 dorms. You know this.
Yes.
This is going to start happening all over America. And my view is, you know, the American higher education market, and it is a market, is going to fix this, because schools are going to have to pick. Either they go the direction of the University of Chicago and they say, you know what, don't apply here if you want safe spaces and trigger warnings. This is a place you come to be challenged. This is a place you come to expose yourself to people you think that you're going to hate, and see if it changes your point of view. Or they're going to go the direction of the University of Missouri, and only one type of those institutions is going to be financially viable in the long term.
So I'm sure we're going to get mail saying, you know, Milo's not a serious person, he's a provocateur, to which I would say, I could care less. He's got a point of view and he has a right to express it. But I am interested in your response to that criticism, because you hear it a lot, that you're not actually making an argument, that you're intentionally trying to provoke the kind of response we saw last night.
Well, my response is, so what? Who cares? I'm an entertainer. I'm a performer. People like, you know, I guess my sort of things are sort of part lecture, part stand-up. One of the things that authoritarians hate, one of the things dictators hate, is the sound of laughter, because they can't control it. They can't control what you find funny. And that's one of the reasons the left is always trying to dictate what humor is acceptable. You know, oh, you can't tell that joke because that's sexist. You can't tell that joke because that's racist. Well, they do that because laughter you can't control, and trying to sort of hammer that down. I'm the worst example for them of somebody who is persuasive and interesting and funny. Every one of my shows is sold out. Every single time I do a talk, people say, I never thought of that. You've really converted me. So that makes me dangerous. Dangerous because my audience is so young, so big, so strong. I'm the person probably that annoys them more than anybody except Donald Trump, because I'm effective. And that scares them.
Who, by the way, tweeted about you, I think at 3 in the morning Eastern time last night.
Daddy did. He's got my back.
To say, this is appalling, and to threaten a pulling federal funding from the University of California system, to which the lieutenant governor, by the way, of California did not attack Gavin Newsom, did not attack the mob that set vehicles on fire and tried to injure you, and did injure a bunch of other people, but attacked Trump for threatening the funding.
Well, you know, this seems to be a fairly obvious consequence. If you don't uphold your legal responsibility to, you know, to enforce the First Amendment, you know, to provide speakers with platforms and audiences with safe, the ability to go and listen to speakers of all different kinds, agnostic of ideology, as you were saying earlier. If you don't do that as a university, you're not performing your essential function. You know, Berkeley gets $370 million a year. It is one of the biggest research universities. It's one of the highest ranked research universities,
right.
But it's churning out graduates who don't do very much, because only 47% of their graduates go on to full-time employment when they leave. It seems to me that a lot of that federal money could be repurposed very effectively if Berkeley refuses to honor its First Amendment commitments.
Yeah, for HVAC repair training, I would say. So I want to get to your book. You're traveling the country because you're selling a book.
Well, I'm traveling. Well, I've just started. I think I'm about to switch into the book tour. So Berkeley was supposed to be the last grand finale. My wonderful costume finale was supposed to be the grand finale. I'm now focused. You're smirking at me. I'm now focused on the book, of course, which is rocketed to #1, the Amazon bestseller list when it was announced.
So it's a Simon & Schuster book, and they took a lot of criticism for giving you an advance on the book and for publishing it in the first place. And part of their response was to pledge that the book would not contain what's called hate speech.
Yes.
What is hate speech?
I don't know. I'm probably going to get in terrible trouble with them, but I have no idea, and I don't think anybody else knows either. I mean, it seems to be speech that somebody doesn't like somewhere, a joke that's wrong, some you know, thing that someone offends someone's sensibilities or hurt feelings or politics or something. Certainly the Supreme Court doesn't recognize it as a kind of speech that should be, you know, treated with any special reference or whatever. Hate speech, it seems to me, has been defined by the political left as anything we don't like, anything that violates social justice doctrine, feminism, Black Lives Matter kind of ideology. It's not something that I have ever heard particularly effectively defined.
I have literally no idea what it is.
I have no idea what it is.
But because your publisher, Simon & Schuster, has pledged to keep it out of your book, did an editor say to you, here's how we define hate speech, and here's what we're going to be striking from your manuscript?
Again, in so much trouble. I don't know what they mean by that. Look, all I can tell you, this book actually is going to be a lot more serious than people probably anticipate from me. I have my college tour to lob bombs, to be outrageous, to whatever. This book's actually pretty meaty, pretty substantial. It demonstrates a lot of reading, a lot of consideration of the issues. This book is already going to be one of the big books of 2017. It is going to be one of those, a big sort of signature, you know, cultural moment for a particular millennial generation that suddenly woke up and decided that being Republican was cool and was a libertarian, you know, punk alternative choice. I'm one of the people they look up to as a, you know, as a sort of, as a whatever cultural figure. This book actually is much more serious than people imagine. So if you're a feminist or a Black Lives Matter activist who is looking to be offended by this book, you might be disappointed. And if you're somebody who's going in just thinking, oh, this is going to be a load of, you know, jokes about his black boyfriends and, you know, and name calling and fat jokes, you might also be disappointed. This is a pretty substantial book. It's a book that sets out where I believe America went wrong in terms of respecting the First Amendment, the state of free speech on American college campuses and in the media and in academia and everywhere else in American public life.
So we talked about this last night briefly, but you're obviously an immigrant to this country from the UK.
Well, I'm on a visa technically. But
on a visa technically. Presumably you came here with the assumption that this was a place where you could express your beliefs, even if not everyone agreed with them.
It was horrifying.
How has it lived up to the billing?
It was horrifying. I honestly, I mean, I don't mean to be theatrical, I'm prone to melodrama, but it was horrifying. To come here, you know, land of the free, home of the brave, blah, 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 you know, and for me to do a college tour, to be a journalist here, you know, imagine the fourth estate in America. You could be able to say, do, be anything, right? That's what you would think coming from Europe, where we really don't have free speech protections. I mean, if it exists, there are rules about it. If it exists, it is regulated in Europe, you know? In Europe, you can get arrested for being misogynist, arrested for being offensive. You know, these are actual offenses. These are things the police can come and take you away for in Europe. You know, as Americans don't really understand how bad it is in Europe. In America, I always imagined that this was a country where you could be, do, and say anything. And what I've discovered, not just in journalism, but also in the entertainment industry, and particularly and most importantly in academia, which is where I kind of try and park my tanks on the lawn and really take the fight to the left, which is why they hate me so much, because conservatives are so spineless all the time. I take the fight to them, and on American college campuses, I have experienced, you know, restrictions on the freedom of speech, groupthink, and penalties, social and institutional penalties,
and financial penalties,
for free expression like nothing I ever experienced in Europe.
So really, we're almost out of time, but we have guardians of the First Amendment, official ones. The ACLU is the leading one historically. We tried to get Anthony Romero, the head of it, on tonight to talk about this.
Yeah.
He's refused to come on. We also, by the way, try to get the Human Rights Campaign to come on to talk about this too. But has anybody from the ACLU or PEN America or any people who claim to represent the First Amendment called you to say, we're going to help?
No, of course not. No, of course not, because these organizations have been, have almost completely given themselves over to a particular view of free speech that is hugely restrictive and which circumscribes, which cuts out mainstream, ordinary conservative opinion. There's a reason there's a sort of parallel conservative media in this country. There's a reason why there's this extraordinary bifurcation between liberals and conservatives in this country. It is because the establishment, the media, academic and entertainment establishment has made certain sorts of political opinion, respectable, reasonable, mainstream opinion, impossible to express in public.
It's the definition of corruption, unfortunately. We're all going to pay for it. Milo, thanks a lot. That was interesting.
Thanks.
Good to see you.